everyone, this is Yannick, and today I'm going to talk about the classic jazz standard Misty, written by Erroll Garner. It's one of my favorite ballads, and my goal for today is not just to show you the notes, but to explain this tune to you and help you understand it on a different level. We're going to talk about the melody, the harmony, and the rhythm, and we're going to look for patterns in this tune, and also talk about other songs that use similar progressions, because I believe that if you study music this way, you're going to be able to memorize it faster, but you're also going to inspire your own creativity. So let's look at what Erroll Garner did with Misty. Alright, so the first thing that we'll want to do is look at the key signature, and in this case there are 3 flats, which means we're in the key of E flat major. I recommend that you're able to play the diatonic 7th chords that are in the key of E flat major, and also that you understand that we can call those chords by their numbers. So this would be the 1 chord, F minor 7 would be the 2, G minor 7 would be the 3, A flat the 4, B flat 7 would be the 5 chord, C minor 7 would be the 6, D half diminished would be the 7, and E flat again is our 1. If you understand that, you'll definitely be able to follow along with me here. So right away we're starting on this E flat major 7 chord, which is our 1. And the melody starts on the 5, goes to the 3, and then lands on the 7, right? So right away, we have this beautiful jazzy quality because the melody is on the 7th, right? Listen to the next bit. All right, so already some interesting things are happening here harmonically, but first let me talk about the melody. Oh, don't you just love that? I'm as helpless, we jump up a major 7th, that's a pretty big jump, as a kitten up a tree, right? Right here on this B flat minor 7, we go from the 3 to the 9, right? We go to the 9 on top, which then becomes the 13 for our E flat dominant 7 chord, walking it down to our A flat major 7, okay? Now we know A flat major 7 is our 4 chord. But what's interesting about the second measure is that we have B flat minor 7 and E flat dominant 7. Now earlier, we talked about these chords, and B flat we would expect to be dominant in the key of E flat, right? But instead we have a B flat minor 7 going to an E flat dominant 7. So we have to ask ourselves, what's going on here? This is a technique in music called tonicization, where we're using the 5 chord of the chord that we're going to, in this case A flat, our 4 chord. And we're actually taking it a step further by taking the 2 chord of A flat, then to the 5 chord of A flat, and then resolving. You see how that works? This is very common in music. Another song that uses the same principle is interesting, right? So it's that same progression here. In this case, we can look at this as a 2, 5, a 4. All right, let's keep going. Let's see what happens next. Now I love this in the melody. We're basically outlining the chord tones, right, of a flat major 7. And then, just as before, again, we're highlighting the 9th of the chord. In this case, B flat is the 9 of an A flat minor 7, right, which is the 13 of the next chord. So this is really interesting here. And this chord progression here, A flat going to D flat, this is one that we would expect to resolve to G flat major, right? Because this is the 2 and this is the 5 of G flat. But instead, in the next phrase, we go back to E flat. So what's going on there? Well, this is one that actually is also quite common in music. We call this a backdoor progression. You might have heard a tune by Charlie Parker called Yardbird Suite. Okay, that one uses that same type of chord movement. So what is happening here? Why is it that a D flat dominant 7 chord seems to work just fine in resolving to an E flat chord? Well, in order to answer that question, let's look at the chord tones that we use. D flat, F, A flat, and B, right? Do you notice how those chord tones resolve to E flat? If you look at a 5 chord in the key of E flat, which is what you typically expect to see before the 1 chord, right? We have B flat, D, F, and A flat. You notice how that shares 2 common tones with the D flat dominant 7, B flat, F, A flat, and B. So that's interesting to take note of, right? We call that a backdoor progression in jazz. Right? I can't. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to do some circling. I'm going to go ahead and first circle this 2-5 progression and then indicate that it's taking us to our 4 chord. I'm also going to circle this chord progression and indicate that it is also taking us to our next chord, which is, in this case, we call that a backdoor progression. Let's keep going now. I can't understand, I get misty just holding your hand. All right, so in this next 2 bars, we have the 1 chord, and the melody is right on the 3rd, right? Very nice when the melody is on the 3rd. Again, the 3rd in the melody, 3rd in the melody, right? So this would be a 1, 6, 2, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that 2-5 because we always want to keep our eyes out for 2-5 chord progressions. I'm going to go ahead and do this one in orange, and there's a good chance it'll come up again. So, but let me talk about this for a second, this idea of highlighting the 3rd. Another song that does that is All the Things You Are. That's a great example of a tune that highlights the 3rd, and the 3rd is a very important note in music because it essentially defines the chord quality. All right, so we have this 1, 6, 2, 5, and then we do what's called a turnaround at the end. Turnaround is typically a 3, 6, 2, 5 progression, or it could be a 1, 6, 2, 5 progression, but it's some type of cyclical movement that takes us back to the 1. In this case, we have G, which we could call our 3 chord, then going to a C. We would expect that to be minor, right? But it's not uncommon at all to make the 6 chord dominant, right? In this case, it's actually functioning as the dominant chord of our F, right? We can call that a secondary dominant, and then to our B flat. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that 2-5 right there at the end, which we had before. And this one here, let's go ahead and mark that one in a different color. Okay, that little 3-6 progression, which is also functioning as a 2-5. So let's look at this. All right, the 2-5 of 4, 2-5, which we in that case call a backdoor progression. 1, 6, 2, 5. 3-6, right? 3, 6, 2, 5, and then back to the 1. So we repeat that the second time. All right, so let's talk about this one. First, we have our B flat minor 7 and E flat 7 again. Remember we saw that in the opening bar of the tune? So let's go ahead and highlight that, since this looks familiar. Very good. And this is again taking us to our 4 chord. And the melody there, we have the 3rd on top. And I love this right here, that F flat, same as E natural, right? That is what we call the flat 9 of the chord. Very expressive and colorful note. This is going to the 3rd of the chord right on A flat, and then A flat again. Now listen to what happens next. This is probably the most interesting phrase of the whole tune. Okay, so what is happening here? Well, we always want to keep our eyes out for those little 2-5 progressions, and there's quite a few of them here. First, notice that the melody repeats, right? We have this in the opening of the B section, and when we go to the second phrase of the B section, we're that same theme but altering it a little bit. And now we go to this chord. Okay, now this is really interesting. A to D is a 2-5 in the key of G. Okay, but that's not where we're going. And then we go to a C minor to an F, which is a 2-5 of B flat. So we can try to look at this from a harmonic analysis perspective, but sometimes it can actually make things more complicated. And what I like to do here is simply look at the movement of the melody and the movement of the bass. So if we're on an A flat chord on that bottom line, our melody just wants to go to the D, right? And our bass, all we have to think about is moving up a half step, right? That's how I would think about, as opposed to thinking, okay, now this is a 2-5 of G, which is the 3 in E flat, right? That's a lot of mental calculating. I like to do that in some parts of the tune, but I also sometimes will simplify it and just ask myself, okay, what is the root movement doing? In this case, right, we're just moving up a half step. And I love this here, this is a minor 11 chord, beautiful chord. Very colorful in the right hand to have that 11 to a D7, right? Melody is the same as the root. This right here, this 2-5, I just think to myself, okay, D goes down a step, right? And here, this stays on the same note. So that's how I'm thinking about it. First up a half step, and then 2-5, and then here down a whole step. Okay, that's how I'm thinking about it, because the root dictates where things are going, right? So we have okay, then we have this beautiful chord right here. We have the 9 on the C, right, to the melody on F. This is the highest note of the whole piece. That's why I'm following you. And then we have that 3-6-2-5 movement again. A little bit different this time because now we have a minor 7 flat 5 instead of the minor 7. So earlier we just had the minor 7, but I'm going to circle it anyway because it's very similar. Okay, and then we're going to go back to our regular 2-5 here, which we expected. And here, these other chords, we haven't come across those yet, so let's use a different color for these. I'm going to do pink for this one, and let's do purple for this one. Let's play through it one more time. And then we would take it back to the A section to do the final verse. All right, so that's the B section. We have more of these 2-5 progressions, these little patterns that, in case of the last line, move a little bit unpredictably, but in that case, just let your ear sort of dictate where you need to go. So it's a beautiful tune. I just love how a lot of the melody is highlighting these extensions of the chord, right? Like we have the 9, the 13, we even have the 11. So we get some really colorful choices in the melody there. I think that's one of the things that we love about this ballad and what makes it so jazzy and misty. Well, thanks for joining me on this song analysis on the tune Misty. I hope you learned something new from it. And I guarantee that if you practice songs this way and if you really take your time to analyze and understand them, you will learn them faster and you'll be able to transfer that knowledge to other songs as well. All right, happy practicing.